Former Vice President Joe Biden is going on the offensive after being criticized by the two leading African-American candidates in the Democratic primary. You may remember the moment in the last debate when California Senator Kamala Harris criticized Biden for his stance on federally mandated busing in the 70s. Here's part of that exchange.
Do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well,
I
there
did
was
not
a
oppose
failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in.
So at a fundraiser in Detroit, Biden said, quote, "I'm not going to be so polite this time." He went on to say, quote, "because this is the same person who asked me to come to California and nominate her in her convention." Biden is also attacking New Jersey Senator Cory Booker's criminal justice record after Booker criticized Biden for his role in writing the 1994 crime bill, which is often blamed for contributing to mass incarceration. First, you'll hear Booker, then Biden's response.
Look, I'm disappointed that it's taken Joe Biden years and years until he was running for president to actually say that he made a mistake, that there were things in that bill that were extraordinarily bad. And now he's unveiled his crime bill for a guy who helped to be an architect of mass incarceration. This is an inadequate solution to what is a raging crisis in our country.
Cory knows that's not true, number one. Number two, you know, the significant part of the incarceration that occurred before the crime bill was written, number one. Number two, if you look at the mayor's record in Newark, one of the provisions I wrote in the crime bill, a pattern and practice of misbehavior, his police department was stopping and frisking people, mostly African-American men. We took action against them. The Justice Department took action against them, held the police department accountable. He objected to federal interference. If he wants to go back and talk about records, I'm happy to do that, but I'd rather talk about the future.
Joining me now with more are two of CBS News 2020 campaign reporters. Jack Turman is in Indianapolis and covers Cory Booker. Bo Erickson is in Washington. He covers Joe Biden. Also back with us from Washington is NPR lead political editor Domenico Montanaro. Welcome to all of you. We'll turn back to Senator Harris in a moment, but I want to start with the criminal justice plans from Cory Booker and Joe Biden. Jack, tell us first of all about Senator Booker's.
Yeah, Senator Booker has made criminal justice reform essentially the centerpiece of his campaign. He was a co-sponsor of the First Step Act in the Senate, which passed last December, that really took on easing sentencing provisions. And he's kind of building off of that moving forward. In the Senate side, for example, he's introduced the Next Step Act that would kind of look at reducing the sentences further and also eliminating the crack and powder cocaine disparity. On the campaign side, he recently, a few weeks ago, released a clemency initiative process where the campaign says 17,000 people would be eligible for them, and that includes marijuana-related offenders. That includes people who, where the First Step to Act, when it was implemented, it was not applied retroactively, so people could help. Cory Booker argues that that initiative would help those people who were not beneficiaries of reduced sentences under the First Step Act. And then the third is also looking on the campaign side as well, looking at reducing the or eliminating the crack and powder cocaine disparity.
And Bo, how then does Joe Biden's proposal compare?
Well, there are some interesting elements of Biden's plan as well, but I guess the headline is that some things now in his plan actually counteract legislation that he championed decades ago. And some of those things that he's now eliminating is the mandatory minimums for sentencing for drug offenses. The second is he would also limit how crack cocaine and powder cocaine and how those punishments are given out. And then the other thing is that he also wants to eliminate the federal death penalty. And as of the news today, that may be even more important, and you may hear him talk about it more. And then there's also two interesting elements to his plan that are new, and that is $20 billion set aside for local and state governments to apply to in order to try to decrease their mass incarceration in their states. And then the other element that he is talking a lot about on the campaign trail is $1 billion to try to improve juvenile justice across the country.
Interesting. Well, Domenico, Joe Biden said that he wants to move on from the past and focus on the future, but will voters necessarily see it that way?
Well, look, first of all, I think this entire back and forth highlights the fact that it's really, really difficult to lead beginning to end in any primary and in any campaign. It's very tough to do. I mean, we've seen former Senator Biden, former Vice President Biden, now slide almost 14 points or so in the average of the polls where he was leading and was at an average of about 41%. Now he's in somewhere 27, 29% range. The fact is that support has been soft all along. And, you know, that's not a huge chunk of the Democratic electorate with this many candidates in it. So it's the attacks from Senator Harris definitely took a toll on Biden, and he's got a big test in front of him now. He's going to have to mix it up with Cory Booker. He's going to have to mix it up with Senator Kamala Harris, and he's got to show that he's got enough alacrity, enough flexibility, enough ability to combat these guys, not so much on policy, but for the viewing audience at home that likes Joe Biden, that wants to be able to see whether or not he can be on stage against Donald Trump. And if he can't be able to, you know, swat back at two fairly young senators compared to his long experience, then that's going to really poke a lot of holes in his electability argument.
Yeah, well, turning back to Joe Biden's comments on Senator Harris, we heard him mention the 2016 California Democratic Convention where he says she asked him to speak. And Bo, you actually dug up that video. Here it is.
And speaking of family, let me say something about our next speaker, Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States. Joe has given so much to our country, and on top of everything he has accomplished, he gave us my dear friend Bo Biden. In fact, it is through my friendship with Bo that I truly came to know Joe Biden, not just as a leader, but as a person. So California Democrats, I say from my personal experience that the Biden family truly represents our nation's highest ideals, a powerful belief in the nobility of public service. Let's give it up for Joe Biden.
Wow, Bo, that is really something to watch, especially with what happened at that first debate, very much top of mind for a lot of people going into this next debate. I mean, this could help explain perhaps whatever discomfort there might be on the part of Joe Biden about sort of going after and taking the gloves off, so to speak, when it comes to Senator Harris in particular.
Yes, and we heard her say at the top that she maybe considers the Biden's family. So I guess we can consider this dispute right now family feud, actually. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So I guess we're all watching this as we go. It is important to note, though, that just after that speech, Biden calls Harris one of his great friends, and then a few months later, he endorsed her for the Senate along with President Obama. So maybe they'll work through their differences, as sometimes families do.
Yeah, all right. Domenico, how strong is Joe Biden's argument that he's protected essentially from her criticism?
Well, he's going to try to make the case about his record, about his history, about the fact that he was the vice president of the first black president in this country. And, you know, with this back and forth between him and Harris, this is the problem for Biden. He thought that he was going on stage and Harris wasn't going to be the one who attacked him. And it was a pre-planned attack. If you go back and read the transcript, this was a section that was about Pete Buttigieg and his record as mayor of South Bend, Indiana.
And she jumped in there,
She jumped in and wound up, undercutting him. But you got to be ready for that. This is politics. This isn't some kind of friendship, where they're both auditioning for the same job.
Right, and from very different places with very different backgrounds. So when you look at the polling for South Carolina, where the African-American vote is seen as critical, Joe Biden still holds a huge lead over the rest of the field. So, Domenico, does it seem like these attacks, though, are affecting him when you look at sort of the big picture of the electorate right now?
Well, I think that overall, nationally, he has had some of the air taken out, but he does have a big lead, as we saw a Monmouth University poll out today showing him with a pretty substantial lead in South Carolina. Look, there's a generational divide among African Americans about what they think about Joe Biden. Older African Americans have a lot of warm feelings toward him, think that they trust him and that they like what he's done in the past. And, so a lot of that is built in. And, in South Carolina, that's 61% of the electorate in the Democratic primary is going to be black. So the thing is, in 2008, when Barack Obama was able to win over African Americans in South Carolina, it didn't happen until late because they didn't think that he could win. All the reporting that we had then, when I was there on the ground, they weren't sure about Barack Obama and whether or not he could win and whether or not white America was ready to vote for him. But when he won Iowa, that's what propelled him, and it became a runaway. So for Senator Harris, she's going to have to show that she can win in other places, or at least fare well, for her to be able to do well. It's not just going to be guaranteed because she's African American that she's going to win in a place like South Carolina.
And all three of these candidates, Biden, Harris, and Booker, will be on stage for the second night of debates next week. Jack, what can you tell us about how Cory Booker is preparing?
Yeah, well, Senator Booker and his campaign have been holding the cards pretty close to their chest right now, so they haven't been sharing much. But what's interesting now, as we briefly talked about electability earlier, is that today at the National Urban League, both Senator Booker and Joe Biden spoke, and they did not reference each other. But more broadly, Senator Booker said something pretty interesting where he said, don't tell me what you're going to do. Let me see what you've done so far. And he's kind of speaking more broadly of the issue of electability here. And with 5 candidates of color on the debate stage with Joe Biden, it should be interesting how the narrative goes, especially with criminal justice reform taking the center stage right now.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could tell just from these statements yesterday and the elaborate sort of written statement that came out from the campaign of Senator Booker. I mean, they are really priming for this debate coming up. So, Bo, we already heard a bit about Joe Biden's strategy, but what else can you tell us about his own sort of preparation?
Well, yesterday he said that he is trying to make his answers all fit within a minute, and that's hard. One thing interesting I wanted to note was that our Caitlin Huey-Burns asked him if he would be more polite, and this was before he said it at the fundraiser, and he said back to her, "I'm going to smile a lot." So we know that for sure that he's going to smile. And one interesting thing that may push campaigns to do more on the offense this time is that our battleground tracker that just came out a few days ago, 63% of Harris supporters said they support her because of her debate performance. So other candidates may look at that and say it's worth the payoff if you go for the big guy.
Yeah, right. Very notable, that figure. Well, before we move on, Domenico, Bloomberg reports that Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins still has not decided if she will run for re-election next year. According to the Morning Consult's poll, Collins' approval within Maine has dropped significantly since her vote to confirm Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. How important is this seat to the balance of power in the next Senate?
Look, it's going to be absolutely crucial. I mean, you look at a state like Maine, you look at a place like Colorado. As Democrats want to be able to, reduce Republicans' majority in the Senate, these are going to be key places. And Senator Susan Collins is somebody who's upset a lot of the Democratic base and some of those center-left voters with the way she handled, for example, the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, being so much on his side and on the president's side. A lot of Democrats who saw that as a kind of litmus test have now said, you know what, this is enough with Susan Collins, that they thought that she was a moderate and that they have drawn a very bright line. And this is something we've seen, all through culture, where you have people canceling each other out and saying, you know what, this has gone too far. And, in this era of Trump, they're going to be pushing to have somebody else in there. And this is probably the best opportunity for Democrats to be able able to take back that seat in Maine. And for Susan Collins, she's going to have to make a decision on whether she's up for that fight.
Yeah, a lot at stake in that race. All right, Jack Turman, Bo Erickson, and Domenico Montanaro, thank you so much.